You did it. You walked away from the abusive relationship, but now what? In this video, I'm going to share with you 2 things that you can start doing right now to start working with and through the trauma that was created, the things that you picked up during that relationship, so that you can start clearing that out so that you can regain your sense of self. So, losing your sense of self after a verbal or emotionally abusive relationship is so common. The abuse over time really starts to break you down. The abusers in these types of relationships are very methodical, whether they're conscious of it or it's an unconscious thing that they picked up from their childhood. So if you think back to the beginning of the abuse, like when it all started, especially if the abuse was verbal, did you ever laugh or think it was just ridiculous because you knew that what they were saying about you was absolutely not true? So, for example, in my situation, um, I used to be referred to as the scum of the earth a lot. And I remember laughing one of the first times because I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like, that's not me. That's not who I am. But over time, this statement really gets wired into your brain. The repetition gets into your subconscious, and you start, even on an unconscious level, sometimes believing it. So by the time I left, I I think I deeply believed that I was scum. And it wasn't a conscious thing for me. It was more it came out in how I felt about myself. Um, my self-confidence was at 0. I had no self-esteem. So it was very interesting because I wasn't even aware of this belief. I wasn't aware of it until I started paying attention to my inner self-talk. But before I go any further, there's something very, very, very important that I need to say right now. I am so fucking proud of you. I am so proud of you for leaving. That is probably maybe like one of the hardest things you've probably ever done in your entire life. And I know exactly how hard it is to leave because usually by the time that you know that you need to leave, usually you have been so beaten down that sometimes if you realize that if you don't leave, you may just die. That was where I was at. It took every ounce of strength for me to confront my ex and leave. And it was strength that I didn't even know I had in me. Sometimes leaving is scarier than staying. And so if you're here right now because you left, I want you to know that I see your strength and I am so proud of you. And I really hope that you're proud of yourself as well. So before we go any further, I just want you to put your hand on your heart. Maybe take your other hand and kind of give yourself a little hug. And right now I just want you to say out loud or in your head if you can't say it out loud. I just want you to say that you're proud of yourself for leaving. Just say you're so proud of yourself for doing this. You're so proud for leaving. It takes a tremendous amount of strength to leave, and if nobody else has told you yet, I want to be the one to first tell you that I'm proud of you. And everything from here on is easier than taking the abuse. The healing process is a journey and it takes time and a lot of love and compassion towards yourself, even when you feel like you don't have that. Even though you may not feel like you have any love for yourself right now, don't worry. We're going to develop that. Okay, so now let's jump into it. So you've left, but now what? So if you've lost your sense of self, and this kind of really happens over time. So if you've been in that relationship, if you were there, or if you've had multiple relationships like that, over time, your sense of self starts to like diminish and diminish and diminish. So it's very important that we start reconnecting back with ourselves. So I want to talk about boundaries because abusive relationships trample all over boundaries. So right now, you probably don't even have a sense of any boundaries. You may not have any boundaries up with anybody, and you may not even know what kind of boundaries you need. one way that you can start figuring out where you might need boundaries is by starting to pay attention to either people, situations, things that start to trigger you. So if you're having a conversation with someone and you feel that like inner trigger of like uncomfortableness, that's kind of a sign that maybe there's a boundary that needs to be put up there. And starting to ask yourself why, why was I triggered by this person, this situation? What was it about this situation that triggered me? Did it trigger something from my past? Um, Maybe it's not necessarily the person, but it's something they said that triggered you. So really asking why can kind of get down to the root cause of like what's going on. And then from figuring out the why, you can start to figure out where you might need boundaries or if you need boundaries. I know that there have been times in my past where after coming out of the abuse, I was triggered by situations or conversations, but when I really got down to the root cause, it wasn't the person per se, but it was something about how they said something or what they said that triggered something from my past. So this will help you decipher like whether the boundary needs to be with the person or if it was just triggered from something and maybe just becoming more aware of where your triggers are, figuring out why, and then figuring out if you need a boundary there. Maybe the person that you're speaking to is speaking to you in a way that is similar and that's triggering, and you're realizing that this person is not healthy for me. So that's one way of, really trying to figure out, like asking why, going deeper is a good way to figure out where you might need some boundaries. And this is really important because you are allowed to decide how people talk to you and how people treat you. This is up to you. You can decide that. And if nobody's ever told you that before, here's your permission slip to cut any toxic people out of your life. Because in order to heal from the trauma that you endured, you need a safe place and you need safe connections in your life. And even if that means removing yourself from everyone and isolating so that you can start healing, I know I did that for quite some time during my healing process and journey because I really felt like I couldn't be in relationship with people. Um, I really needed that alone time to have no other distractions, not even distractions, but I just needed that isolation and time to myself to really feel into everything that I was working through. And by setting up boundaries and enforcing them, that's what you're doing. You're creating a safe space for you to start healing. And the second thing I want to talk about is your inner self talk. Before I go into this, though, I would love to introduce you to the book that I wrote for you. Yes, that's right. I wrote a book specifically for you because if you're here with me right now and you relate to what I am saying, you are the reason why I wrote this book. It's called Reconnecting with Self. It's a guide for rekindling the relationship with yourself after emotional and verbal abuse. And before I describe it any further, I just want to say that it's $1.99 on my website. I wanted to make this information accessible to everyone. I did not want the price to come in between, someone who needed this information. And when I left my relationship, my abusive marriage, I couldn't afford therapy. So everything in this book is literally what I did for myself um, to heal everything and to really develop a loving relationship with myself, which is something I didn't even have before the abusive relationships. So this is like I took my journey, and my journey was not from A to B. It was like up here, down here, all over the place. And so that's why I wrote this book. I wanted people who are coming out of the same kinds of relationships, I wanted them to have a clear, cleaner path to healing. So everything in this book is exactly what I did to go from being a shell of a human being. I really lost all of my self-confidence. I had zero self-esteem. I was very codependent, and everything in the book is exactly what I did to get to this space where I don't have the trauma anymore. I've really healed. I'm not going to say 100% of it because every now and then random things will still ignite a little bit of a trigger. But the cool thing is that over time, the triggers get less and less, and they're not as powerful. And that's because of a very powerful guided meditation that I put in, that's in chapter 6 of the book. Um, it really, really helped me go back into a lot of my trauma, not even just with my relationship, but with my childhood as well. And this is not your typical ebook. It's a 60-page ebook, and it's 6 different chapters. Each chapter is a different subject. And in that chapter, we go deep into this in the subject, but then there's journal prompts for you to go deeper within yourself. So it's really like an interactive, like you're going to read through it, and then you're going to work with the journal prompts, and you're going to work on the exercises that I put in there so that you can really start to transform your life. So in this book, I go deeper into the boundary setting, like figuring out how to figure out where your boundaries need to be and how to set those up. We go over how to start developing a loving relationship with yourself. I go over really easy exercises to start to develop trust, self trust, and self gratitude. That was something that I lacked completely. I had zero of that. And so these are the exercises that I personally started doing that really, really helped. And I even do them to this day. They were so powerful. We also dive into finding the why in terms of why we are the way we are. We go back into childhood, past relationships, and all of that to really dig deep into why we are the way we are. So, if this sounds like it can help you, I will put a link in the description to this book. Again, it's $1.99. There's no financial risk in this, and you have everything to gain. This is literally, if I could go back in time and give my past self one piece of advice, and I could bring this book to my past self, oh, that would have tremendously cut the amount of time that it took me to get to where I am today. It's powerful. So no risk there. Link in the description. Now back to the video. So going back to our inner self-talk. When you've gone through emotional and verbal abuse and it was repetitive, you probably unknowingly took on some of that abusive language and made it your own. This is kind of done unconsciously. So I'm going to share a little bit of I'm going to share I'm going to try to make this quick, a little example of my own, how I discovered this for myself. So in my past relationship, my ex-husband um, he got me into working out, but he was like a drill sergeant, and he always made me feel like I was never good enough. I was never fit enough. I was never enough. And it was really detrimental to me because he would just keep pushing me and pushing me and pushing me and would never allow me to take breaks where my body needed breaks. Back then, I actually injured myself because of it. But so fast forward then to once I left him, and I was in this like crazy, I was obsessively working out. And I noticed one day that if I took a break, if I took a day off, when I needed a day off, but if I took that day off, I noticed that I was beating myself up. And I realized that I would rather just work out and push through that than have the negative talk that was going on in my head. And I was like, whoa, when I realized this, I had to sit down with myself and I was like, okay, what's going on here? And I realized that was what he would do to me. Those are the things he was saying to me. That's how he made me feel. And now I took it on as my own, and it like it shocked me so much that like I stopped working out for a while. I had to quit working out because I had an unhealthy relationship with it, and the negative self-talk was just horrible. So I stopped working out, and I realized I was like, okay, I need to stop working out and I need to learn how to love myself no matter where I'm at, with my body no matter what. And so I took a break from working out. I took a decent break that needed to be there so that I could get rid of that negative self-talk in a very loving way. But just to like shake all that off and get to a place where like I was okay with myself no matter what. So you might also be experiencing some of this. And so the way to kind of figure this out, I just want you to start really paying attention to how you're talking to yourself. You know, if you start feeling negative feelings, start asking yourself, what are you thinking that's making you feel that way? And journal about this, write it down, write down anything that you're saying to yourself, and then also just start looking at that and asking yourself, is this what I really believe? Or was this how they spoke to me? And so now that's how I speak to myself. Really figure out if this is your own or if this came from the abuse. So then once you figure out what you no longer want to start, telling yourself and thinking, then I want you to take something like a positive that you can switch it out with. And every time you start realizing that you're going down that normal path of like negative self-talk, I want you to literally say stop, or in your head say stop. So you really have to know get really clear on like the negative self-talk that you are having so that you can catch yourself and stop it and then replace it with something better, something true, something better for you. And this is going to take repetition because it took repetition for that to be ingrained in you from somebody else, and it's going to take repetition to create that new neural pathway so that it becomes habit, and then eventually over time it's not going to take effort to stop it and redirect it. So if you're still here with me, I would love for you to comment down below your favorite color heart emoji. And if this information helped you in any way, I would love for you to think about liking the video and subscribing. I am going to be doing an upcoming video, maybe even a series of videos, I'm not sure yet, on survival mode, specifically survival mode linked to being in an abusive relationship and then coming out of that, and then I'm going to share my experience on how I was able to get out of survival mode and kind of what comes up when you start doing this. So if that resonates with you in any way, definitely subscribe so that you won't miss that video. So thank you for being here, and I hope that this information helps you. I would love to hear from you in the comments and connect with me over on Instagram and Ko-fi. All those links will be in the description. And I love you. I'm proud of you. And I will say goodbye for now.